Hello, my fellow Chibits. Today, I am here to bring you a manga chapter review of Boku no Hero Academia, or My Hero Academia, depending on which title you want to call it, Chapter 25 review. So, today's chapter that came out just today, about probably 5 hours ago from now, it pretty much came out today, and for the most part, this chapter, a lot of info dumping. It's not a bad chapter when I say info dumping, but there is a lot of information that was kind of put on top of us with this chapter when it came to a lot of the characters. Like, a bunch of characters in this chapter got their introductions finally with their names, along with their quirk abilities, the different descriptions of their quirk abilities, along with the continuation of the race of, you know, seeing who's going to compete and actually make it to first place. Pretty much, this chapter, there was a lot going down, and it's so much dialogue, and there was a massive cliffhanger at the end of this chapter, which, oh my god. Like, seriously, there is a cliffhanger on this chapter that just left us hanging. I'm like, you kidding me? You fucking kidding me? The thing is now that we're at this chapter 25, I think we are caught up. Like, we are completely caught up with the series, and now we must wait weekly for a new chapter. So, I don't think we're gonna have any chapters, like, every 2 to 3 days anymore. I think we are finally caught up. So, interesting. So, right off the bat, I got a couple of notes here because there was a lot of names and a lot of introductions to these characters with their abilities, and I don't want to fuck up their abilities, and I actually want to dive in and talk about some of their abilities, so I took the time to write down the names and, you know, their quirk abilities and stuff like that, and I want to discuss them with all of you. So the first person that, you know, was introduced in this chapter was Kirishima Ejiro. Now, Ejiro, his ability is hardening. He's in Class A. He's actually one of the main characters or side characters of Class A with, you know, Deku. And for the most part, we finally get his introductions to his full abilities and how they really work. And pretty much he just hardens his skin, and he has like this ability to where he can have the ultimate shield and the ultimate spear because of the way he can harden his body. And then you have this other dude that's actually introduced right beside him at the exact same time. His name was Tetsu, Class B. And I'm thinking like, who the fuck calls their child Tetsu? Like, no. Okay, no, it's not just that. The dude's name, Tetsu, his name was actually Tetsu, and then his, I guess, first and last name was Tetsu. So, first and last name was Tetsu, and I'm like, you fucking kidding? Like, who in their right fucking mind as a parent names their child the same thing for the first and last name? It could be a translation error, it could, but I wanted to bet, knowing by Fallen Angel of how good quality they do when it comes to their translations, I highly doubt that's a translation error. So, who calls their child Tetsu, and then Tetsu for their last name? It's like calling me Jacob. Like, or it's like calling someone Tom. Like, I mean, imagine if your name was something like that. I mean, that poor kid, I feel bad for him. I feel so bad for him. You know for a fact he was probably bullied with that name. They're just like, oh my god. It just, like, it's fucked up. So, past that, okay? Tetsu's ability is still pretty much hardening, like hardening still. So his ability is exactly like Ejiro that was from Class A. Like, they're completely similar. Like, their abilities, their descriptions, like the exact descriptions of their quirk abilities are identical. Like, just straight up identical, except one is hardening and one is still. So, interesting. And you gotta love how Ejiro runs. I was like, you're a copycat and all that. Like, we're just copycats, you know, and he runs off. That right there, funny. Just straight up funny. I laughed my ass off on that. And that's going to be very interesting. They might make a combo in the future. Like, I could see those two working together in some form of hero group, since technically they have the same power. Be pretty interesting. Now, the next group, or the next, you know, person I want to talk about is Seto Hanta. Now, this dude, he uses tape. And instantly when I saw this dude, Hanta, use tape, I'm like, that's Spider-Man. That's just straight up Spider-Man. That is a fucking Spider-Man reference. Like, the dude spits out tape out of his elbows. Not his wrists like Spider-Man, but he spits out fucking tape out of his elbows. Like, yeah, tape it, yeah. You know, that's how he is. He's like, yeah. So, he can be pretty much Spider-Man with his elbows. He's like this, and fighting crime, like, yeah, let's do it. I mean, oh god. I can imagine that shit right now. I mean, imagine that, dude. He's just going up. He's like, yeah, a fighting crime here. Let me wrap you around tape. Yeah. And just like, enough said. So, the dude's Spider-Man. Just, Honda is Spider-Man. I don't think I really need to describe him any more than that. He's just Spider-Man without the webs, just using fucking tape. Okay. The next one on the list is Tokoyami. Now, Tokoyami, he uses, like, a dark shadow ability. And I saw him last chapter. I've only seen glimpses of his ability through the course of the series thus far. Tokoyami, he actually has this, like, black familiar inside him, like a shadow familiar that comes out of his body, and he can summon it and use it to fight for him, pretty much. So, it's not necessarily, like, shadows, like he uses shadows to fight with. He's actually using, like, a familiar summoning that's actually living inside of him to fight for him. So, very interesting. At first, I thought he was going to be like Shikamaru from, you know, Naruto, but finding out that he actually is way different from Shikamaru, I'm like, oh, damn. So, a really interesting character. I love his design. I haven't really actually talked about him at all through the course of me reviewing this series. Tokoyama actually has a really good design, especially with his, like, you know, hero mask, like the freaking crow or bird type, you know, suit. Looks badass, really does. So, next character I want to move on to. Okay, so there's this other character that was introduced in this chapter, and I don't know if her name was revealed or not, so if it was, I am very sorry, but I don't necessarily remember a name at all in previous chapters with this girl. But there was a girl, if I'm correct, was introduced with this chapter. We get to see her quirk ability, or technically not even her quirk ability. We see this girl participating in the race with technology. So, very different type of character from the other characters of this chapter that was kind of introduced with their abilities. Like, you have this female character that actually uses technology instead of quirk abilities. Now, I don't know necessarily if this is attached to her quirk abilities, but from the dialogue of this chapter, it makes me believe that she can actually use her, like, gadgets and technology to fight crime instead of actually using abilities. So, very interesting. That might mix up a lot of things in the future, because, I mean, we do know that Nomu was made by someone creating him. We knew he was created to fight All Might. So, this technology that this girl has, it might eventually lead into something important, like it has something to do with Nomu. I'm willing to bet it. There's a lot of connections with that. So, besides that, there's another character that was briefly shown in this chapter for like one panel. We got no name, no dialogue, but we got to see a glimpse of this character. There was one female character in this chapter, like right towards the end, that had like freaking, I guess, thorns in her hair, or roses. Like, she had like vines, like rose vine type hair, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, her hair reminded me of poison ivy or something. I'm like, interesting. So, I want to know more about that character. Very good looking character. Like, it just stood out of all the abilities. Like, I'm interested to find out about that vine hair type thing. So, that's pretty much the characters I think that was technically introduced with this chapter of Boku no Hero Academia. So, next thing I want to talk about is probably the reveal of Todoroki. I think that's his name, Todoroki. You know, the dude that has the fire and ice ability. I hope I didn't fuck up his name. I really hope I didn't. But either way, if I did, I'm very sorry. But Todoroki, pretty much we find out that he is the son of the second strongest hero in the world, underneath All Might. So, this right here reminds me of a lot of similarities of Neji and Naruto. Let me explain, okay? Todoroki, he is technically the son of a high prestige person. Pretty much, you know, his father, okay? That is the second strongest hero in the world underneath All Might. Izuku is the student or pupil of All Might. Nobody knows that, of course. Nobody does. But he is the student of All Might. And, I mean, think about the jealousy that most likely Todoroki is going to have towards Izuku when he finds out about Izuku and All Might's connection. Because you do know that he's probably going to have some form of jealousy or something like that that probably is connected with his father, and which will eventually lead into something going on between these two characters, you know, Todoroki and Izuku. I see that coming so far ahead. I see that happening. I'm placing money on that right now. That is definitely going to happen. So, besides that, we get a little bit more of Izuku in his, intelligence. Once again, the main character, Izuku, loving him, just straight up great main character, because he's not just using his abilities to beat the shit out of people, he's not using his one for all to kick the shit out of the competition, he's actually using his noggin to come up with tactics and plans to be able to win this competition. For instance, in this chapter, Izuku actually uses, like, a plate of the arm of the robots that have been broken up into pieces. He actually uses a plate of their metal, and he actually destroys a robot that was running at him by using their momentum to destroy him. And I'm like, oh, shit. So he actually used pretty much his brains to defeat the robot without even using his one-for-all power. And I'm like, whoa. And it's not just that either. At the end of the chapter, Izuku actually does something very desperate and interesting that I did not see coming. Out of all things I did not see coming, it was definitely that. Izuku uses this minefield at the end of the race to actually jump ahead, or try to get ahead. But he's technically not in the lead at the end of the chapter, but this is probably going to be very good for him, because in the chapter, he's actually using the shockwaves of these mines while he's riding this metal plate to bounce up over the explosions like a shockwave to get into first place. So once again, we're finding out more intelligence about Izuku and how he loves thinking ahead and how he thinks about these plans and tactics without actually using his power. He is definitely going to be a great leader in the future. I see that happening. So I think that's pretty much the chapter of Boku no Hero Academia. Great chapter, loved it. I really loved this chapter. Nothing really wrong in my eyes. So tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I love you. Please be safe, and Chibi out.